I don't want you to build a business that is like foundationally set on your capacity to endure pain. That's not that's not sustainable in the long term. Well, good morning and welcome to our weekly training with the Coaches Plaza. My name is Amanda Kaufman, and this week we are talking about how to scale without burning out. We're going to talk about the smart way to grow, and what a perfect time to be talking about this because we are about to start a new year. Oh my gosh. And if you're looking for the recording for today's training, make sure you are in our Clients Over Chaos community. You can join us at nextnumber5clients.com. That's nextnumber5clients.com. And you can catch this recording and all of our past replays. That's where we store it. Let's get this party started because, like I said, now's a good time of the year to be thinking about what could I be doing to have a great 2026 and achieve my goals and scale my business and not have the whole thing suck. So I think that that's a pretty important objective because here's the truth. Most of the people that come to me, they already know how to coach. They already know how to help people. They already have, this delightful way that they connect with other people. But the thing is that very quickly, those beautiful, powerful, incredible skills end up getting the light dimmed. I'm like looking at a lamp. I'm staying in an Airbnb in Canada today, actually for the past couple of weeks. But yeah, like your light tends to dim right away as soon as we start to actually grow a business around it. Why? Well, because people tend to have a lot of habits around sacrificing their health, sacrificing their time, sacrificing their sanity. And like you don't need that, right? You don't need that. And for a lot of people who are building a coaching and an expert business, good morning, Annie. I'm glad you're here. I noticed that like these businesses tend to start from a super heart-led place. I know that was true for me. Shout out heart if you're like, yeah, I mean, I did this because I did the thing I needed to do for a long time. But my heart led me to wanting to help other people in a really meaningful, impactful way. So what I want to talk to you about today is like, how do you build this business in a way that is sustainable and energizing and ideally not exhausting? Now, you might feel tired from time to time. Like, oh, I stayed up super late with my family, and that's their habit. But I stayed up super late with my family, and I am tired, but I'm not exhausted in the kind of energy where it's like you can't recover from it. You know what I mean? So I never want to make it sound like business is just so crazy easy and there's like nothing to it. But I do think that we tend to approach things in a way that makes it a little harder than it has to be. That's fair, right? I hope that's fair. So today we're going to talk about, how do you know that you are getting stuck in kind of a hustle and grind strategy versus a systemic, scalable strategy. Okay. So if you're, and by the way, high achievers, they're honestly at the most risk of hustle and grind because you've learned somewhere along the way that if you just do the work, you're going to get the reward. You learned that. I don't know where you learned that. I don't know where you got that from. Maybe you got that from your parents. Maybe you got that from your schooling. Maybe you got that from your career, but you got it from somewhere that as a high achiever, you can pretty much just like show up and focus real hard and you're going to get somewhere. But the thing is that that can be really unsustainable, right? So very often high achievers will pair that with like terrible sleep hygiene. I was just talking about I'm on vacation, y'all. Like, come on, give me a break. But generally, terrible sleep hygiene. They pair that with drinking. Is really, really common among higher achievers that I work with. And we have to remove that security blanket very often, or at least reduce that considerably. Very often, high achievers will tolerate bad behavior from other people for a really long time and it grates their soul. And, the thing is that you learn somewhere that you can really get somewhere just by enduring that stuff. I don't want you to build a business that is like foundationally set on your capacity to endure pain. That's not sustainable in the long term. And if you're with me, the other thing we're going to talk about is like, how do you spot whether you are legitimately tired from doing something or are you flirting with burnout? And we're going to talk about some of the experiences I've had with burnout over the years. Yes, it happens, but we're going to talk about like how to identify it in an earlier stage and what happens if you don't. We're going to talk about the difference between your capacity to do something and your capability in doing something. Because again, as a high achiever, very often you learn somewhere along the way that you can just sort of grit your way through. And sometimes you think you don't have capacity when you do, and sometimes you don't think you have capability and you do. And we're going to talk about like the difference between the both and how you make space for both. Let's see, what else have I got on our docket today? We're gonna walk through a method together called the Scale Smart method, where we're gonna simplify, systemize, and support. It's super simple, but it's such a powerful framework. I'm gonna walk you through that. And we're gonna learn how you can grow your business while keeping something that I lovingly refer to as boundary. Boundaries, we're gonna talk that today. Does this sound like a flight plan or what, right? And by the way, if you haven't already registered for the planning extravaganza, do make sure that you register at the link that I just popped in the chat. And if you're on the Instagram or watching me elsewhere, make sure you send me a direct message and say extra so I can get you a ticket. It's free to watch on New Year's Eve. It's like New Year's Eve earlier day, my time, which is Central Time. But it should be wrapped well before you have to go to dinner or anything. Coffee moment. So let's talk about it. So why do traditional hustle and grind strategies fail high achievers? I think there's a few reasons for this. The reason it ultimately fails you is you're too smart. And I'm not blowing smoke. I mean, you're too smart. Like, you see that it's unsustainable and you see how tired you are feeling, or you're seeing the suffering and the pain. And when there's no end in sight to that, you bail because you know that that's not what you want. And especially as you're moving into different chapters or seasons of your career, you know that you don't want to just like blindly hustle maybe the way you did when you were 20. And I'm already there, right? Like I'm 20 years into my career, and I'm like, yeah, there was some dumb stuff that I did that was like really unsustainable that I'm like, not going to do it. So hustle and grind doesn't really work. I think another reason why hustle and grind doesn't really work for very high achievers is very often you have several people really depending on you being your best. So that was definitely my experience. I've got my kids, I've got my Chris, I've got my family, I've got friends. I've got a lot of people in my life that I want to show up well for. And if I'm always in a hustle, and I'm always in a grind, and I'm always justifying why I can't come to their party or take the phone call or, have a positive relationship, that really sucks. And I think especially among coaches, you're so heart-led, you understand the value of relationship. And so hustle and grind doesn't really work, right? Because you don't really want to, no worries, Debbie, we got you on recording. It's no big deal. But you don't really want to be in a long-term hustle and grind strategy, because the reason you became a coach was because you wanted to access your heart and you wanted to give your heart, right? So that's why it doesn't work. So when I say hustle and grind strategy, what do I mean? I mean like the advice, like, just go join a bunch of Facebook groups and send messages to the members, right? Or like send a bunch of friend requests and hope for the best. Or I actually hate networking for this, like just endlessly going to networking events, new networking events, and like hunting for people. Like those are very grinding kinds of strategies. Now, if you're working a process, and we're going to talk about the scale system a little later, there's always going to be an initial period where you work out the kinks and you work out the actual system and the actual process. So I think like people start these processes, and that's okay. That's not yet hustle and grind, because what that is that's research, that's data gathering, that's optimization. Like those are really valuable activities. When it becomes hustle and grind is when you skip the part where you start to systemize what works. Notice what I said there. Systemize what works, not just systemize because you're systemizing, but systemize something that's actually working and giving you the result that you're actually after. And if you're not getting to a place where you're even delegating either to like physical team members or AI agents or, like getting things off your plate, again, that work, because there's a lot of people that are building a lot of stuff right now. And this is actually classic hustle and grind where they're building automations they don't understand. They're using prompts they don't understand, and they don't understand why they're doing it, and they don't understand the outcome that they're really after. We're turning into like this copy and paste society that is just copying and pasting indiscriminately, and they're not creating things that they really understand. So that's like another rant for a different day, but it's basically creating a lot of AI slop. What do you think happens when you build a business full of slop? Right? Are you going to be fulfilled by that? I got to tell you, there is a correlation between how burned out you feel and the results that you're getting. If you're getting decent results or you're getting progress results, you're going to be like, all right, that was hard work. I sweat a little, it took a little more effort than I thought it was going to take, because it always takes more effort than you think it's going to take. But you don't mind. Why? Because you're making progress. And I think a lot of people are not making the kind of progress that they're going to be wanting to see in a few months, because we've got this real copy paste culture. So sometimes hustle and grind is really the result of a habit around not really engaging with what you're building. So yeah, it's kind of funny, hey? Like you would think that copying and pasting would make your life a whole lot easier and you'd be less burnt out. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't use prompts. I'm not saying you shouldn't use, technology. In fact, I believe you really should. But direct it towards something that you have a reasonable conviction that there's going to be an outcome that you really care about. So for a lot of coaches, using AI to help you with crafting your social content, good idea. Good idea, right? Using it to build your avatar profile for who you want to market to and who you want to sell to and do your offer design, great idea. Using it to actually build your offer so it doesn't suck and it's actually appealing to somebody else, it's a good idea. I mean, like it helps, right? So the way I would think of the AI question, that it's not just hustle and grind, copy and paste, chasing all the newest things that are coming out at rapid pace, is to instead say, like, how can I do what I was going to do 10 times better or 10 times faster, right? Like, that's a higher quality perspective to apply. Because who cares if, like, Google came out with this new version of whatever engine and it's amazing? Okay, cool, right? Like, that's interesting. But what are you here to do? Are you here to be the AI expert that's on the bleeding edge of all of those things? Or are you a coach that wants to connect with human beings? And being aware of the tools helps you to decide whether you want to apply them to what you're building. But you see what I'm saying? Right? Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, like, you can even use it when you're in programs with me, right? No problem. No problem. You can use it. I'm just saying, don't turn it into another social media feed, right? Where you're just not really building anything. Okay, so let's talk about how do you spot whether you might be burning out. About a week ago, I think it was actually last week, I did a live stream where I was talking specifically about the difference between challenge and, how did we phrase it? It was challenge and drag, sustainable drag. So if you didn't see that one, you might go back and you can go to next5clients.com and you can go up to the learning tab and you can see the vault where we have all of our past recordings, and you can check out that training there. A lot of times in a very mental health fixated society with a lot of short form video addiction happening, we tend to get very pop psychology ish. You know what I mean by that? Like we tend to be really obsessed with the pop psychology, right? And the thing is there's like really good science around psychology and mental health, but if you're getting most of your information from 30-second clips, you're probably not getting the highest quality information, just like being for real there. And so the thing is that the reason I bring this up is that our society has pathologized normal emotional experience. That's my take, right? That's my hot take. So anytime somebody feels scared, they're like, "Oh, there's my anxiety." And it's like, "Well, maybe you're just scared because you're actually being challenged by something." Like there's a difference between pathological, condition and a normal emotional experience. And when you're building something new, when you're building a business, you are going to encounter, ideally, and I hope for you, a range of emotions. You're going to experience joy, you're going to experience frustration, you're going to experience sadness, maybe bouts of depression. You're going to experience, I'm just like listing all the things that I often will feel. Excitement is a good one, but that doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. And I've had a lot of clients over the years who have this real and fear of burnout, and they describe burnout. And I'm like, how do you know that you're burned out? And they'll tell me a story about when they got legit burned out like 20 years ago because they didn't know any boundaries and they were a young person and they got like really like physically just distraught, like they needed to have therapy, they needed physiological intervention, they were underslept, they were poorly eating, like they had a whole like real episode. So I'm not here to say that burnout's not real and it's like something in your imagination. But I am here to observe that a lot of the time, that experience, that memory of that experience, which by the way, you'd be so shocked how many people actually relate to that experience and have a version of that story. But they did the work, they got on the other side of that. And now there's this like, oh, if I get the slightest bit tired, if I get the slightest bit confused, if I'm experiencing a heavy negative emotion, it might mean that I'm returning back to that place. And I just really want to encourage you that if you are actually that scared and nervous about it, you should probably be working with a therapist to release yourself from that, and maybe there's more work that needs to be done. Being tired is not the same thing as being burned out. Being disappointed is not the same thing as being burned out. And I think like our society in general, like I said, tends to pathologize, tends to like catastrophize that because a negative emotion is being experienced, that there's something fundamentally wrong. And I'm like, another way to look at it is that it's a check engine light. So if you really are tired, like listen to that. For sure, listen to that. When was the last time you really tuned into your intuition? Right? Like it doesn't have to you don't have to go all the way to like there's something, totally wrong with you that's going to take years and years to repair. Sometimes you need a sandwich, or a weekend or a vacation. I've been on vacation for the last couple of weeks. I honestly didn't even realize how much I needed this vacation. I'm on it and I'm kind of going like, wow, I don't think I was on the verge of burnout by any stretch, but I can really feel my mood elevating. I can really feel my energy, returning to the ideas that I like to create and all of that kind of thing, simply because I took a break. So if you're like, so how do you know that you're possibly in a burnout place or possibly derailing your growth? If you're starting to feel like you can never get untired, right? Like you're carrying the sleep debt, it's time to get that back on track, right? Because to me, in my experience anyway, it's the sleep debt that causes usually a downhill spiral for everything else, because it's kind of one of those keystone foundational habits that if you are way out of whack on the sleep thing, it's hard to be in whack with everything else. So definitely check that out. If you're finding that your social habits around follow up, follow through, maybe you're short tempered, maybe you feel like you're overly emotional, it's like, okay, we gotta check in. We gotta check in on your physiology. Some of us are going through like different life stages and things like that, hormonal changes. Like, be accommodating of yourself. Don't think like you don't have to push beyond it or deny who you are or what your physiology is. Understand it and work with it. That's what I would say, right? Yeah. Make sure every day you're giving yourself breaks. Make sure every day you are giving yourself an opportunity for reflection, ideally in a journal. Ideally, give yourself 10 minutes to just meditate in the quiet. That can be so life-changing to just do those things. If you do those things, you can continue to make progress every day, so then you're not derailing your growth. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between capacity and capability. So when something is not getting done or when something needs to get done that's like new, you actually need both capacity and capability. So capability is knowing what to do and specifically how to do it. So sometimes when I'm working with coaches, they know what they need to do. They know that they need to post on social media, they need to have an email list, they need to have an offer, but they don't have the capability to do those things yet because they don't know the specific step-by-step routines to execute to produce that result. That's capability. And I think about business as a lot like math. Like there's foundational things that when you learn those foundations, then the next layer can go on top and the next layer can go on top and the next layer can go on top. And, after years and years, you might just be able to do some pretty crazy calculus stuff, But if you never learned how to divide, how are you going to be able to handle differential equations, right? Like, why would you? So capability is learning how to execute a routine with excellence, ideally, to produce an outcome. That's capability. That's how I think about capability. And just like math, there's procedure to it. Or cooking is another one, right? Maybe you don't relate to math, but maybe you relate to like being in the kitchen. If you're a highly capable cook, you are able to execute a sequence of steps in a specific way to create a particular outcome. Who here's ever met a terrible cook, right? Like a terrible cook, it's simply that they didn't have that capability developed exactly, right? They may have the capacity to cook. So meaning they went into the kitchen, they put some ingredients together, they did stuff to it, but they might not have the best outcome because their capability in cooking isn't very good. Capacity is your time, your energy, and your financial capacity to apply a capability. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. Capacity is your available time, your available energy, and energy I would say is physiological, like ability to stay focused kind of energy, but it's also an emotional energy, right? If you have the tenacity, if you haven't read Grit, by the way, by Angela Duckworth, totally worth reading. But energy to me is like not just your physical capacity, but also your emotional capacity to do these things. And then finally, like financial. So some things do cost money, and sometimes you can spend money to save time, but most certainly to create something, you will need time, you will need energy, you will need focus, you will need to make decisions, and very likely those will have financial implications. And whether they are straight up investments, so sometimes you make a decision where it's like, I'm going to spend money to get a thing, right? Sometimes it's actually, I'm going to spend my time over here, which means I won't be making money over there. So that's called opportunity cost, and it's still part of your capacity because sometimes you have opportunities that might deserve more of your attention. And I bring that up very specifically because a lot of coaches get into this because they want to have more money for what they do as a genius. And I love that. And also sometimes the thing to do is have a part-time job as well because their financial goals can create a lot of undue pressure on the capacity to actually build the business because they're not able to make the right decisions or have the right tenacity because they're so stressed by their finances. So capacity, you need both. You need both capacity and capability. And there's a lot of people in this world, my word, there's a lot of people in this world that have capacity that turn away from developing capability. And they turn away from developing capability because they think, well, good enough is good enough. They think, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. They think, well, I should already know this. I was a victim of that one because I was in corporate America for 10 years and I was selling consulting, so I had a lot of good relevant experience, but I kept telling myself the lie that I should already know how to sell. I should already know how to do the financial management. I should already know how to do the marketing. And I had to really humble my ass, right? I had to humble to realize that although I had a lot of capacity in terms of my energy and my enthusiasm, a lot of capacity in terms of I had prioritized the time to do this, I had to really humble and say, like, I may have had really cool capabilities in the old career, but I didn't necessarily have them in this context. Right. So that's kind of like getting back to the cooking example. Maybe you're like really good at roasting turkeys and making soup and, peeling potatoes. But if somebody asks you to do puff pastry, or like a tiered cake dessert, even though you're good in the kitchen with other things, doesn't automatically mean that you're going to be good in the kitchen with new things, right? So sometimes your scaling is being held back because you're not putting enough time into it. I hear that a lot, but I think that if you had more capability and knew what it would actually take, you would have more willingness to assign the time that's required to actually complete the tasks, right? Okay, let's talk about the scale smart method. So when you're building your business, there's like the cool thing about an expert business is it's actually a super simple model. You meet people that you can help, and then you talk to them, and then you invite them to have a conversation or an experience about whether there's a fit to work together in a deeper way, and then you get to work with them. So it's 4 steps: meet, talk, fit, coach. Meet, talk, fit, coach. So I've been teaching MTFC for years at in the simplest terms. And this is really, really powerful because I used MTFC when I mainly had networking as the way that I met people. I used MTFC when I was mainly using paid traffic to meet new people. I used MTFC when I switched to being almost 100% organic, meeting people. I mean, it just works, right? And so the model itself is actually pretty simple. It's the nuances of how do you decide to meet people? What's the best way for you to meet people? And I'm so curious, are you an urban person? Like, do you live in a city? So, like, your nearest Walmart is a good 20 minutes away as a little bit of a proxy. Okay, so kind of urban, suburban. Yeah, that's most of my clients, and that's me too. I'm suburban as well. So for you, because you're urban, suburban, meeting people, the fastest way is probably to go to networking events. If you're rural, and I've helped a lot of people who are rural, the fastest way for you to meet people is probably through virtual, right? Now, here's the thing. You can do virtual no matter where you are. And what's great about virtually meeting people is that you can do it 24/7. So if you're like me and you have, commitments and family and all that kind of thing, it's not a terribly convenient thing to get in a car, drive for an hour, go to the thing, be there for 2 hours, drive for an hour. You lose at least half a day. And that's not considering the energetic toll. I'm an introvert. So when I go to in-person events, it's like, that's like the day, like it's like the day. So it really has to be a room that's worth it for me to do it. And I have found those rooms, but I love the virtual. Now, here's the big disadvantage with virtually meeting people is that I almost think of it as like the relational distance is automatically so much longer. So when you meet somebody in person, you find things in common really quickly. It could be physicality, it could be style, like they've got great shoes, or the notebook that they're carrying is really cool. And because you're like forced physically together in a small number, you learn really quickly about the other person and you can share really quickly about yourself. So that's why like networking is a really great strategy for meeting people. When you do virtual, you literally see less of each other, right? And because of that, it's harder to build common ground, commonality. It takes more repetition, it takes more focus, it takes more finesse, there's more precision that's required to show the parts of you on purpose that they can find common ground with. And so that's why you end up having to meet so many more people with virtual networking than you do in-person networking. The other thing is that in a virtual environment, there's so much distraction, right? So when I'm in a networking environment, it's eye to eye, belly to belly. When I'm here, I don't know how many tabs you've got open, but you've probably got a few. I don't know how many pings and dings you've received since we started this training, but probably several. And so I'm not just, showing a very small fraction of who I am and you having the same thing. There's also just so much attention that's competing at the same time. Now, that's not to say that it's impossible, but it does change the model, right? So with the scale model, we simplify, systemize, and support. So one way you can simplify is you can simply make the decision to choose where you want to focus. Do you want to focus on in-person networking as your primary channel? Do you want to focus on digital networking as a channel? Do you want to focus on digital marketing as a channel? Well, digital marketing is where you catch attention and you pull them into your own community. That's what I do. But pick one, right? Simplify. Just pick one. Stop requiring that you've got to be so good at every single thing that you do, because there's just too much to do, right? Like, it's better to just really simplify and hone in on a particular part of the process. To systemize, to build like your recipe, your particular rhythm for how you do things. So for example, I do this live every single week. We take this live, and we create additional content from this live every single week. And by doing so, we've systematized our presence on the airwaves, that even when I go on vacation, even when there's a whole bunch of other things going on, what's happening? Well, my business is still advertising. My business is still putting things out there. My business is still operating because we have a system for it. And thinking about the content that I do for my digital marketing, I'm also supported. So I've got a team member whose responsibility it is to do the editing of the episode and to publish it to the other channels and to schedule the shorts and all of that kind of thing on the Instagram. When I started this whole thing, I did it all myself, all of it myself. And my system was terrible. It was basically paper-based. It was really, really simple. But I had kind of a map of what I wanted it to look like. And then we found tools to support. So like, I used to do these lives on Facebook and that's it. Well, Facebook changed how they do things and they weren't keeping the files anymore. And also the quality of the video was really low. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to enhance the system by using Riverside, right? And so we built templates, we built tools, we built rhythm, we built all of those different things. And then eventually I had my team member take over the ownership of this whole process. So then I have my part that I play. He has his part that he plays. But I don't have to spend a bunch of time doing a thing that I've already figured out how to do. And that, my friend, is how you actually scale. And the reason this is so super important is because you can push for a season, but a business is an entity that is going to last for ideally decades, right? Like, this is something that you're in for, it's not a 6-month project. It's not a 90-day project. It's a lifestyle, right? Like there's a lot more to it. And so the reason why it's so important to follow that simplify, systemize, support system, which I lovingly called the Scale Smart method. The reason that's so important to follow is because for you to grow your income, your impact, and to keep up with the change that's happening, you personally need to have the capacity to handle that next level and next wave of change, right? Because it's on you. You're the boss. You're the CEO. You're the creator. So if you're stuck in doing a bunch of work and never getting out from under it, then your business is going to just stagnate. It's going to stay whatever revenue level it's at. And so the way I look at it is we do really well as performers when we have discrete projects that we are executing we execute and finish the project, and we're on to the next project. Your business building is a series of projects that you're implementing over and over and over again. And the thing is most people, when they approach business, they're just running the same project over and over. They're not building on the foundation of what they had before. Now, if you realize that your business isn't scaling because it can't grow beyond you, it means that it's really fragile. So the smartest leaders, they build support, they build systems, and they build space before they start pushing a bunch of people through the system. And especially with a coaching business, protecting your energy is the most important part of being able to grow a coaching business. There's going to be so many things that attempt to steal your energy, and I'm here to tell you, it is so vitally important that you protect it. So vitally important. So, to put all of this into action, list 3 parts of your business that depend entirely on you. Okay, so maybe that's posting to social media, maybe that's the coaching, maybe that's something else. I don't know. You list three pieces, then choose one and design a system or assign a helper to actually handle it. Even one handoff could buy back hours and hours of your time, and it creates this momentum that you need for scaling. So hope you loved this. If this episode gave you hope that growth doesn't have to mean burnout, then make sure you share it with a friend who is ready to scale smarter, and invite them to join us in the Clients Over Chaos community at next5clients.com. And we'll make sure we have the link around this video if you happen to be watching it on replay. I'll be back next week, and we are continuing our journey together. We're going to be focused on the number one reason that high achievers stay stuck and how to fix it. We're going to activate in the new year with this, and I will see you very soon.